Why is Monument Valley important to creationists? Let's find out on Revolution Against Evolution. Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
And your co-host, Rich Gear, here as well. And very happy to be back, Doug. It's been a little while.
Yes, I think there's been an event happened in my life that waylaid a few things.
He just recently got married, and he's happy as a clam. So
I guess
I'm very excited for that, you know. And his lovely bride is here, not here, but upstairs. And so he came down here. We'll do a show today, and we're going to talk about Monument Valley, Doug. And so why is Monument Valley important to creationists?
Well, I think it's the best example of where you have erosion taking out a whole section of the country.
Yeah, right, okay.
And it's the extent of the erosion here that really belies any evolutionary explanation. But it's an example of how much sediment would have had to have been removed during the latter stages of the flood.
So let's do a little description here, because Monument Valley is a very famous valley. It's used a lot of John Wayne westerns. It's the desert with these buttes that go up, and they're beautiful buttes. They're wonderful to look at. But there's a lot of sediment. They're just like kind of isolated things, and they're very scenic. Right. It was used, like I say, in a lot of films, a lot of movies.
Yeah, but Forrest Gump used it.
Oh, yeah, he did. Forrest Gump used it. That's right. I forgot about that. That's right. Anyway, so I think the erosionary thing, at least at first, let's talk about that a little bit, Doug. I think that the idea that there's these structures, these buttes that are up, and where's all the sediment that was around them? What happened to it all? I mean, where is it?
Well, one of the reasons why you have the buttes themselves,
right,
is because those butte rocks are hard. They're hard sandstone.
Okay.
And but the sediment underneath it is a lot softer.
Okay.
And so what happens is that it starts to undermine the sediments underneath the buttes, and then little pillars of rock break off and fall and create the talus slopes below. And so if you have a slope like this, it means that rock is much softer than the rock that's above it.
All right.
And so if you take a look at the mittens, which is the right mitten, the left mitten, they're actually the west and east mittens is what they call them.
And I'm not admitting to anything.
No, you're not.
Oh, so I couldn't resist it.
And then there's Merrick Butte. There's three of these that you can see.
Those are buttes.
Yeah.
That's those pillars.
We got them in the background here. So.
Yeah. Now, Doug, what's the difference between a butte, a mesa, and a plateau?
Okay, a butte is a small section of rock. A mesa is a large set of a table rock.
Okay.
And an example of that would be the Hopi mesas that are east of the Grand Canyon.
Okay.
And then the plateau is where it's a whole vast area.
So each one of these gets bigger and bigger.
Right.
But are they similar causal relations, or are they entirely different?
Well, they're all flood-related deposits.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Okay.
So we'll explain this in the context of the biblical flood, and we can, it helps us to understand how these sediments got laid down first was during the first early stages of the biblical flood.
Right, first like month or two or whatever. Okay.
Right, and then so anyway, we have all the sediments that are laid down during the flood. They form all the layers that are eroded away.
And this is when the Bible's talking about the waters increasing upon the earth. Wouldn't that be at that time? Okay.
And there's a lot of the reasons they became rock was because of the weight of the water on top of the sediments.
Ah, okay. Not the sediments themselves, That's some of it, but the water itself is.
There's a cementing agent
That's yeah.
that causes the rocks, but also the pressure, and they have different grades of sediments that are softer and harder, and the buttes in the Monument Valley are the ones that are the harder rock.
Okay.
And so, and then north of the San Juan River, which is just near Mexican Hat, that's a little town.
Yeah. I remember Mexican Hat driving by there. Yep.
There's another set of buttes called the Valley of the Gods.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I don't think you've seen them, but
Valley of the
Larry
Gods. No,
and,
I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the Garden of the Gods. That's up in Colorado. Valley of the Gods. Okay.
the Valley of Gods. John Iverson and Larry and I explored those when we went to. We then went to Natural Bridges. Now there's just north of Mexican Hat. You go maybe 10 or 15 miles, and then you encounter the mesa, the Cedar Mesa.
Okay.
Which is where that's a large area of hard rock.
All right. Okay.
And so there's the switchbacks that go up this cliff. And
yes. Now that I do. I think I remember that. For some
you
reason.
remember that, yeah. Because you were at Natural Bridges.
Yes.
But we took the side trip into the Valley of the
Because
Gods.
Natural Bridges is where you have the second Kachina Bridge or something down when you hike to the bottom, and there's an apatosaur, a brontosaur, or sauropod type of petroglyph there. You know,
Right.
Is that where it is? Yeah.
That's where
And we've shown that on the show before. It's an Indian petroglyph with a dinosaur. Anyway, back to what you were saying there. Yeah. So all this is kind of related. This whole area.
Right.
And how
That's
many,
near the Utah and Arizona border.
Okay.
If you go Route 160 from US 89,
Okay.
you go past the dinosaur footprints.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
In Tuba City.
Tuba City.
And
Yeah.
then you head over towards the Four Corners area, and then there's a branch that goes through Kayenta, which is a little Navajo city. Then, as you go north and you get to the border, there's a lodge there called Goulding's.
Okay. Have you been to that?
That's where we, Larry and
Yeah,
John.
and I wasn't there at that one. This was with you, Larry, and John. Okay, all right. I say because I don't remember that anyway.
And Goulding's is where you take the tour with the Navajos, and they take you out into the desert and in their jeeps. And
okay.
And did you go on that?
Not in their jeeps. No, I remember. I remember the Tuba City. That's the only one I really remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the jeeps is something that you can take a tour. It costs like $70.
Okay.
So it's a little pricey, but
Did you see some good stuff?
Yeah, they take you out to the area called the totem pole. Did you see the totem pole?
No.
You didn't see the totem pole. You didn't see the cave that has the hole in the top that becomes an arch. I think it was called Moccasin Arch. And then they take you over to Ford Point, where you can see the whole panorama of the.
Wait a minute. Okay, an earlier trip we did that. I think because wasn't it one of those arches kind of in the Indiana Jones movie or something? Wasn't there one of them? Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong. Was that there's like a double? Not was a double arch, but there's something you go up and you climb up into it. Yeah. Okay. And that's right. It was G. Okay, I'm conflating something else. Okay, so
yeah, you've been there twice.
Yeah, I've been there twice. I know what that is. That Jeep. Yeah, that Jeep trip was. Yeah, I remember that because that's where a lot of where some of the movies were filmed in those areas. And yeah, I do remember that. Okay, so anyway, continue with what you're saying.
So logistics of it is that you can, when you're climbing the face of the Cedar Mesa on Route 261, going up towards Natural Bridges, you can get a good panorama of that whole area with
So how is this? How is this explained by? I guess I'm trying to figure out how the long age people explain this. I know they always glibly say, well, millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years, sand and
Well, it
erosion.
takes a long time to erode these
Yes.
sandstone
And we
blocks.
found that that's not the case at all, because there's been some of those arches or formations that have actually collapsed within our lifetime. Some of them, and there were some that when you went down back out there in the, I think it was in the 70s or something, there were some things that have changed even since then. Sandstone does not take that long to erode.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at stuff, even with some of the harder stuff, millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years, there should be nothing left. It should all be basically level. So they have to basically postulate it levels, rebuilds, levels, and rebuilds.
Right.
It seems to me that's what when I recall reading some of the stuff, there's always a regenerative thing that they appeal to, but there's no evidence for any of that ever actually happening. It's just these are there. They were eroded. That's why we talk about all the talus or the stuff that should be at the base of it. There is some, but it's not like it's not like that should be. There should be all kinds of it, and it's like. But if there was a flood and post-flood runoff, that would have carried a lot of the sediment away from that area. You know?
That's the big question for evolutionists. Where did all that sediment go?
Exactly.
If it was one sand grain at a time, just eroding down the path of it.
Yeah, it should be there, and it's not.
And
okay?
I think evolutionists would like to admit that places like Canyon de Chelly and this area is young, because in order for it to remain in this state, time would really erode it away.
But their idea of young and our idea of young is quite a bit different. Their idea of young is still, tens of thousands of years anyway. Hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah. So,
and they wouldn't have lasted even that long, based on what we're seeing. With some of the erosionary processes that we've seen, even since you've been there, and this is the 1940s, 50s, and even the 70s to today, there's been arches, and there's some that are in danger of collapsing. And some of them, and one has actually collapsed, and arches. Is that part of this? That's something different, isn't it?
Arches is north in Utah.
Yes,
so that's some distance away.
But still, that whole area is a floodwater. We believe the whole area at some point was covered in water.
Yeah, this whole area was part of the Colorado Plateau.
And right. And there were spots after the flood waters receded. There were like great pockets, lakes, if you will. They were still there after the flood, and some of them broke through certain areas, causing canyons and causing runoffs. So there was some post-flood action, and there was some seismic activity, we think, after the flood as well. But the sediments themselves were actually laid down in the flood, but the erosion would have been taking place pretty much post-flood, right?
Right.
Okay, or at least end of flood to post-flood has to be a then. So
of course, the evolutionists calibrate their radioisotope dating according to the layers that are laid down. Okay, there's a lot of circular reasoning that's going on with the dating of these evolutionary ages.
Right, because truth be known, radiometric dating and sedimentary rock are virtually exclusive, except for the fact if you have like intrusions. Suppose you have a volcanic rock that's gone through a certain layer, they can radiometric date the igneous rock. But the sedimentary rock is not datable by radiometric processes in and of itself. It's basically by the fossils that's in it, or maybe sometimes they do the isochron, and they'll date with different methods of the igneous rocks that are intruded in there through volcanism or whatever processes. But there's all kinds of problems with all of that business, but most people think they're dating the layers of rocks, and they're not. They're not dating those.
Yeah, you can't date sedimentary rocks with radioisotope
which is
dating.
3/4 of the Earth's crust is sedimentary rock.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly. Now,
laid down by water action.
There is a point that I think has been missed, but even by some of the creationists, that I just thought about just recently.
Okay.
And that is when you're taking radioisotope dates, you have a parent element that decays into a daughter element, and it's the ratio of those elements that they measure in the rocks to give you the age.
Uranium to lead, or rubidium.
Now let's think about that for a second. Uranium is relatively rare. Lead is common.
Right.
Rubidium is relatively rare. But strontium is relatively common.
Okay.
So
Potassium, argon.
So if you're trying to estimate the age based upon the original condition of the rock, you're assuming that all the lead came from the uranium,
correct? Yes.
and you're assuming that all the strontium came from the potassium.
Or rubidium.
If there was from the rubidium, and the argons were very common,
Yeah.
came from the potassium. Now, you have a real problem because the commonplace element is the end product,
Right.
and so the question is, how do you know that there wasn't any of that commonplace element when those rocks were formed?
That's exactly when I saw some of the debates with was it Ken Ham and Bill Nye, the science guy. I think that was. How do you know what you're assuming that this was? But yeah, you're assuming then that the daughter element was 100% uranium.
Right.
The lead was 100% uranium, or that the argon was 100% potassium. There's no way to know that. You know, they said, but Doug, what they do is they say, well, we're comparing it. I think it's the isochron is what they call it, comparing various methods, and they all come out to be the same thing. But if you have the same assumptions,
right,
that's quite likely.
You can adjust your assumptions to
fit whatever you want. And so the measurement in the present is legitimate, but the extrapolation into the past is not. You can infer, but it's not a done deal. It really isn't. And so, and Doug, I've always said that you talk about this Monument Valley, and we look at the 3/4 of the Earth's crust is sedimentary rock laid down by water action. And I've always been amazed, Doug, that these same evolutionary scientists that say there's no evidence for a worldwide flood down here have no problem with the Mars being covered in water totally.
Right.
And we have no evidence of any water, or if there is, it's buried. There might be some. I have no problem if there's any water found there. That's not my issue. The issue is it's basically a desert planet. But here we got 3/4 of the world covered in water already, and 3/4 of the land is sedimentary rock, which was formed by water processes, and there's no evidence for a worldwide flood. Does that seem a little bit interesting and a little bit strange to you? It does to me. So I just thought I'd throw that out there for the heck of it. But these things like Monument Valley, Doug is the geologist here. He gets it, and I love geology, but this guy knows the stuff, and it's really good. So what did you turn the page? Did you want to talk about something else?
Yeah, there's something just north of Mexican Hat and south of where Cedar Mesa comes in. There's a little side road that takes you to Gooseneck State Park.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Gooseneck State Park, you come up, it's the San Juan River has carved these deep chasms and meanders. And the meanders are supposed to happen because the water is flowing through soft rock, and it's trying to
cut its way through.
Slowly. But if you have them entrenched, it means that the meanders got started and then just continued to cut down deeper and deeper and deeper.
Okay.
But if you have, the runoff does cause this sinusoidal wave to form when it's going through soft sediment.
Yeah, cut through. Yes, right. And we don't think it was slow. We think it was fairly quick actions. But because there's all kind of, I don't think it was in here, Doug, but over the periods of talking about his book here, we've discussed like bent strata and warp strata and some of that stuff. This reminds me, and it's different, but it's the idea that things have to be slowly processed. It makes no sense for strata to be like this or interbedded slowly. It makes no sense to do that over hundreds of millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years even, because the rock would have been dry, and it has to be somewhat plastic, or there has to be some process to make it that way after it's been around. And that's what they again appeal to things that we have no evidence for, but they extrapolate or infer because of their a priori assumptions.
A perfect example of that, Rich, is just north of Mexican Hat, actually where you actually see the upside down Mexican Hat balancing on the rock, okay? But there's the mountain behind it. You can see the strata all warped over like that.
I remember that was very cool,
And you see a lot of that, no matter where you go in studying geology. You see a lot of warped rock. In fact, when we were in Smoky Mountains, you remember this?
Yes, I think go ahead.
We were in the southern edge of the park where you did your Fall of Man.
Yes, how could we forget? Okay.
But where you fell off the cliff, but very gracefully.
And I rolled down to a nice little stone and said, "Don't try this at home." Something like that. I can't remember what I said.
But
yeah.
You could see that the strata were flat and they warped up, and and then they were like this, and
it's all over like that, you know. Long-aged people have a good explanation for a lot of this stuff. They come up with these ad hoc explanations, Doug, but they're very. We've never seen anything like what they're saying might be able to happen. But with water, we do see things like that. It makes sense. In fact, I remember they talked about this one guy. He said, "No, there's no evidence for all this worldwide catastrophe." Well, look at Mount St. Helens.
Right.
The canyon that was formed in a couple of days. 1/4 of the side. You're saying sediment doesn't get laid down like that? I said, we have something in the present, observable recent history past to show how that can actually be true. You have nothing to show it's going to happen 1 grain at a time, or a little bit of sediment here, or localized floods over long periods of time. There's none of that. It just doesn't make any sense.
I forgot to mention this, Rich.
Yeah.
But I just saw recently in the news that one of these arches that I was just talking about that had the hole in the top like that, a double arch, collapsed.
Well, I think there's something I remembered about that. I think I was trying to get to that there's one that has collapsed, and you saw it when it was whole. Or I think we saw one. Did we see one?
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
No, that's not what you're talking about.
This is in Monument Valley.
Okay.
On the Jeep tour, and it wasn't the one. The ones in Arches National Park that we saw had collapsed. There was Skyline Arch.
Okay, that's I guess what I'm thinking.
Skyline Arch collapsed in 1942. The Balancing Rock, there was a little balancing rock called Chip Off the Old Block that collapsed.
Yeah.
And then there's the Landscape Arch, which is a big one.
Yeah.
A good section of that collapsed in 1991.
Yeah,
but, I'm talking about something that's happened within the last few weeks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, do tell. Okay.
I just remember reading about it, and I was wondering if it was the double arch in Arches National Park, but it wasn't. It was a similar arch in Monument Valley that collapsed. Monument Valley is an interesting place, and there's a lot of things here that there's the three nuns, the three sisters, they call it, where it looks like the three nuns, and then there's, but you can. There's a spot where there's sort of like a window that opens up. You can see the entire valley down below you, and there's a butte that's called the Bear and the Rabbit. Remember that?
I do not.
And there's another one called the Stagecoach, and then there's the Big Chief.
I think I remember that one, yeah.
And then the King on his throne.
That I remember, okay.
And so those are some of the things that you can see there. It's kind of neat to see all these. But another interesting one was called the Totem Pole and the Jebache.
Okay,
the Totem Pole is just a single pillar that's standing right up. But next to it is a whole bunch of buttes that...
See, all these are basically chunks of like hard rock that stuff like softer rock got eroded away and washed away. Okay, probably like I say during post-flood runoff times, and leaving these isolated upthrusting rock formations. So yeah.
So it's remnants of the Cedar Mesa that has been eroded away. It's about 1,000 feet. That is.
Is it really that? Wow. Okay.
These are huge.
They're pretty tall. Yeah. I guess I didn't realize they were that. I guess I don't remember them that being that big. But
if you remember going up the switchbacks.
Oh yeah.
That was
that's
quite,
the height.
That's the height of all these buttes.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
And so, what you're then having to assume or explain is where did all these sediment in this valley got washed away to it. And the only thing I can say could do that is the flood of Noah.
Flood of Noah, and I would say like maybe a lot of post-flood runoff when you have like big lakes built up. We talked about that with the Colorado and how the Grand Canyon cut in. But remember, I think it was Mexican Hat area. Remember, we were going to Switchbacks, and when you look out over it, it looked like it was a bowl that almost was like could have been a lake at one time. Right. And I always remember that song with it. Was it America or the desert is a something like it's like with that sea with this life underground, but it's like you get this whole idea that at one time it's like a big sea. Or big lake, or big, not an ocean. Obviously, after the flood had pretty much run off, you still have these large pockets and areas of floodwater.
And the thing that's interesting is that the Navajos, and this will be on the scope of this show, Navajos have their own stories about this.
They do. We've talked about that, though, Doug, over the years. Remember that one book, Red Earth, White Lies?
Right.
Guy was spending so much time trying to pretend that he was not trying to justify or support or corroborate the biblical narrative, but everything he was doing was kind of corroborating the biblical narrative. So much of it, What
he was saying was that the biblical narrative corroborated the
copied him. Yeah, that's right. He would try to flip it around. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And you find that with a lot of the different Native American stories that Ian Juby was talking about that with the Cree and the people up in the north. In his area.
That was easy for you to say. Anyway, yes, and what's really fascinating with a lot of the native, we don't want to get too far afield, but a lot of the native legends, and quite frankly, a lot of legends all over the whole world, a lot of them mythologized or embellished or fantasized, whatever. But when you get to the core of the story, oftentimes you say, well, that sounds like that right out of the Bible. The Hopi Indians with their little, remember that the whole world was covered in water, then they found this hole in the sky, and then they pulled it, then that was the underworld or the overworld, and that's where the Kivas and all that stuff was. I said, I know that really sounds fantasy, but it's like, it reminds you that the whole world was covered in Noah, covered in water, and then they opened the hatch of the ark and crawled out, and the world was there. It is. So we're running out of time, aren't we, Doug? Pretty quick.
I wanted to promote my book, Don't Let Your Geology Mess Up Your Theology. If you want to read more about Monument Valley and the creationist explanation for it,
amen.
You can obtain a copy of that on our website, rae.org. And I'm hoping that you enjoy our time on Revolution Against Evolution. And we'll see you next time.